What's going on, everybody? It's Dr. Chris Featherstone here for a live episode of Vision Night Podcast. It's been a while. I've been so busy doing so many different things. So you've been getting different videos non-stream, but I love these streams. I love streaming. I love talking theology. I love talking apologetics. And I love talking psychology. So those are three things I absolutely love talking about. I can talk about till 3 o'clock in the morning. I literally have. That's how much I love talking about those things. And you know what? We're going to blend all those things together today. And, you know, if you follow my channel, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. But, you know, I talk about the Word of Faith doctrine, and also I talk about psychology, and I talk about New Age, New Thought, and how those affect the church. And we're actually going to talk about the New Age implications of the Enneagram. And this person is a really scholar at this, because I mean, she's read so many different things, and not only has she read it, she's been a part of it. She's been a part of the New Age movement. She was once a New Ager, And as far as I remember, she has a certification as far as astrology and things like that. It was able to just be a part of that community for a while. So she actually understands the dangers of the Enneagram. Now, for me, I'm a psychology doctor, and I'll go ahead and of course, I'll put my maybe more than 2 cents in as far as the psychological dangers of the and what we as psychology experts think of a tool as the Enneagram. And we both are firm, avid Christians. We're Christian apologists. So it's going to be a really, really interesting and fun duo with this person tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to bring her on. She is Marcia Montenegro.
Well, that's a way to make anyone feel welcome. Thank you.
How you doing? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Chris.
Fantastic. It's great to have you on the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be on. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting how I found out about you. I was doing some cardio. I always love listening to theology podcasts when I'm doing cardio. And I was listening to a theology podcast, Theology and Apologetics, and I came across you. I don't even know how the subject of Enneagrams came up. I don't even know how it even happened. And I'm like, oh, this person knows what she's talking about. And I love, and I love you started. I think what really got me is you started talking up you started speaking my language when you started talking about the Barnum effect and the Forer effect and things like that. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Let me contact her because she's speaking my language right there. So, it was really interesting. I think it was. I think the podcast was what is it? Coffee culture and
coffee culture, yeah, and
Christ Coffee and Culture.
Christ Coffee and Culture,
yeah. I think that was the podcast I was looking at, listening to,
I've been
and yeah. So and then no, I think I think that was the first time. I think the second time I saw you was the debate discussion you had on Unbelievable. I think that was the second time I saw you.
It was
yeah. Because he was affirming the Enneagram. You know, and God love him. You know, I mean, praise God that he loves Jesus like we do. And you know, there was definitely I was looking at it from a Christian lens and a psychology doctor lens, and I was just like, oh man, it's just, you know. It was really difficult to really listen to that from a Christian defending it, and not just him. I mean, he's you know, he has a doctorate as well, and so he knows his stuff. He's definitely scholarly at it. But I was just looking at it from that type of lens, and I was just like, no, I really didn't see some substantial evidence to really support it. It was just kind of going toward the okay, well, let's not put the genetic fallacy in here and things like that. I'm like, well, you know, you kind of, it's not necessarily a genetic fallacy.
Right.
It's more of a origin, and if the origins still line up with the intent of what it's supposed to be, that doesn't, that's not a genetic fallacy issue at that point. So, So, all right. So let the people know, let the listeners know, who is Marcia Montenegro? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, I have a ministry, Christian Answers for the New Age, and a website, christiananswersforthenewage.org. I was in the New Age, as you said, for many, many years. I was involved in Eastern religions, especially Zen Buddhism, and I was a professional certified astrologer. And then I had other areas I had studied and sort of dabbled in, like tarot cards and numerology, psychic development, palm reading. I didn't do palm reading, but I took a course in it. And so I had these other things too, kind of alongside things that I did sometimes. But my main focus was astrology and Eastern religions and doing Eastern meditation. And that was really my world. And of course, most of the people I knew were part of that world as astrologers, or they were psychics, or they were mediums, or tarot card readers, or just like regular New Agers without any specific any specific practice. And I also knew a lot of Wiccans and witches. I had them as clients as an astrologer. So I wasn't in that world, but I was in contact with it and somewhat familiar with it. So that was really, that was it for many, many years. And then the Lord intervened, and he definitely intervened.
Yeah.
And gradually, I mean, the way I look at it now is that he worked on me over a period of time, breaking down some barriers. And then I got to the point where I saw who Jesus was and turned my life over to him. And of course, became a new person, born again, born from above. And that set me on a really different path in life, needless to say.
Yeah.
And it ended up over the years where I had opportunities to speak and share about what God had done in my life and about the New Age, and that led to a full-time ministry.
Yeah.
So I have been doing full-time ministry as a missionary for 23 years.
Wow.
And my mission agency is Fellowship International Mission in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but I live in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
And not to be confused with Virginia. That's kind of a joke for people who live here. We all know that Northern Virginia is not Virginia. And so I've been doing this ministry and had many exciting things happen.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. What's and what led you to really hone in the Enneagrams? And I see a lot of, like, I scrolled through a lot of YouTube stuff. I didn't have time to watch, but I saw that you're a part of just really a lot of reputable, really, highly, populated YouTube pages from Christian apologists, really honing in on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Now, what was it about the Enneagram that kind of you gravitated to be like this Avenger for the anti-Enneagram Avenger?
I like that. Yeah, what happened is that I first noticed it. I was actually first asked about it in the late 1990s by some missionaries overseas in Austria who were encountering it in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And I found some literature on it. I don't remember how, and because I think I was just barely on the internet then. I can't remember. And I found a booklet and wrote up a history for them and sent it to them. And then kind of just, didn't really think about it for several years. But then I noticed around 2009 or so, it was in the Progressive Church, which at the time, I think they were still kind of called the Emergence or the Emergent Church. This Rob Bell, Brian McLaren, and those guys. And they were doing the Enneagram at conferences. And I thought, well, this is interesting because I knew from the past that the Enneagram was a New Age tool. And I thought, why are they doing it? Well, it turns out because of their friendship with Richard Rohr, a Franciscan friar who had written a book on it. Apparently that must be how they got introduced to it and were, just, I guess, teaching it or doing workshops on it. I thought, okay, this is a little too close for comfort. And it might just kind of slip over, into the church, into the or evangelical conservative church. So I wrote my first article, and that was in 2011. And it's on my website, the Enneagram GPS, Gnostic Path to the Self. And I still think that's the best description for it. And then I kind of just, nothing much happened. Then around 2014, I started posting about it on Facebook. And I'm not sure why. It may be because I saw it getting more popular with the progressives, and or I also had started tracking Richard Rohr in 2013. And he would be pushing the Enneagram. And so maybe for those reasons, I started doing some Facebook posts on it. But then in 2016, The Road Back to You by Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron was introduced from IVP, known as a reputable evangelical publisher at the time. I was very shocked by this. I remember I literally couldn't believe my own eyes. I remember looking at the book real carefully, thinking that I was misreading, that it was from IVP. And I thought, I think I'm seeing things wrong. And the title was strange. I thought The Road Back to You, it doesn't even sound like a Christian book.
Yeah.
And it's really not a Christian book. So that started me, getting a little more motivated to warn and do posts on that and on the two authors. And then the following year, The Sacred Enneagram came out from Zondervan by Chris Horitz. Now, the interesting thing is that Suzanne Stabile, who co-authored the first book, and Chris Horitz, who wrote the second one, were both mentored by Richard Rohr. And that's a very crucial thing to know. And this was alarming to me because by this time I knew Richard Rohr's theology, and I started stepping up my posts. And then the Enneagram, at first people were like saying, Marcia, what is this? I never heard of it. And other people were saying, why don't you post on things that we've heard of? And, why do you keep talking about the Enneagram? And I said, because I think it's catching on. And it was. Yeah. And in 2018 and 2019, we really saw it take off. And by then, we were losing track. When I say we, I mean my co-authors, Don and Joy Vino. Don Vino was very concerned too. And we were losing track of how many books were being published from evangelical publishers. And now I think it's at least 35, I think. So then I really started, I was just spending a lot of time on it. I did do other topics. I wasn't, a one-trick pony. I did do other topics, but I couldn't help it because every other person was asking me about it. Yeah. And I felt like I had to keep up. So that's what I was doing. And then it just became a whirlwind until, not until, it was still a whirlwind. Yeah. We did a book, Richard Rohr and the Enneagram Secret, which came out in 2020. And that gives the history of it. It had 2 chapters on Richard Rohr, why it's a spiritual tool and why it's in conflict with Christianity. So that's kind of the story of my Enneagram journey. Yeah, and yeah. I'm still doing posts on it. So
yeah, you know what? And it's interesting because again, I do a lot of things when it comes to psychology and just apologetics. So I actually am a Bible college professor on cults. I love studying cults.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and it's interesting because it's like I know a lot about a lot of things, but it's like the Lord just keeps bringing me to debunking the Word of Faith movement. It's like there's so many different things on my channel, and the more I go and talk about something else, I'll get like a message, like, hey, can you debunk, or I call it DWAF, D Word of Faith, because a lot of passages are taken out of context for the Word of Faith movement. So I'll get like a message, hey, can you DWAF this? Can you DWAF that? And I'll have because I'm a relationship coach too. And so I'll have some relationship videos and how that, applies to Christianity. And I'll have theology videos. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to step away from Word of Faith. And then, nope, I get right back into it.
Yeah, that's how it is for me with Enneagram. It's like, okay, I'm going to do some other stuff now, and I do. And then all of a sudden something happens and it's like, oh, I've got to tackle it again.
Yep, exactly. And so I'm just like, all right, Lord, I'm going to stay in my lane. I know this is what you have for me. This is where you want me to be. So I yield, I surrender, I yield. So yeah, I totally understand, what you mean by you know a lot of other things, but the Enneagram, just keep going back to the Enneagram. And so and I think it's a really important topic to discuss within Christianity, because it's interesting. I was doing a lot of prep as far as research, before the show, and I was listening to sermons of pastors.
Yeah.
Like it's gotten to the point where I'll see YouTube videos of Christians like endorsing the Enneagram, but I saw like a series from a church and a
Yes.
pastor. It was a sequence of series, and he was like, it was about the number 1. It was about 2. So there's 9.
Yes.
Ennea is Greek for 9, and gram is drawing. So that's where Enneagram comes from. And so basically, it's 1 through 9, and the pastor was every week a part of a series doing a whole sermon on a number.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, whoa, like this is like it's gotten like super, super deep in here now. And and like he was and it was he was talking it was the 4 when I was listening. It was the 4 sermon that I listened to for the longest. And he started because the 4 is the individualist, as you know. And so he was just like, yeah, because this person was born this way. This person you might not like this person from the beginning, but you have these other numbers, that might not like the 4, but that's how God made them. God made them like the 4. So I'm just like, whoa, like this is just totally not.
And more than one pastor did that, Chris.
Wow.
More than one pastor did that. I actually had an exchange with one of them. And I did a post I've done 2 posts on the other one because, not the other one, but one of them because he just came out with a book.
Okay.
I think it's the Book of You.
Wow.
I know. I mean, I don't know. It's almost speaks for itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And along with that, Marcia, like let the listeners know just as far as the history of the Enneagram now and how that ties in with Richard Rohr and his huge influence, because I would even say, and you're more of an expert as far as the origins of the Enneagram. I know it from a psychological standpoint, but you from a New Age standpoint, it seems like the Enneagram was a tool. It was a tool that's been around heavily for probably about 50 years or so, like that. But it seems like Rohr was the one who was really the bridge between just it being a tool that has a bunch of different kind of syncretist, type of influences to it, that Rohr brought it more into the Christian sphere. But Rohr, as a lot of people know, is really big into universalism, really big into panentheism. He's a strong supporter of panentheism. And so it seems like he was the bridge between it being a tool for just everyone to use to come into the Christian circle. How did that come about, Marcia?
Yes, he was. I have said that many times that it is in the church because of Richard Rohr and his influence. It was prior to that, out there as not a well-known thing at all. And when it first began, it had nothing to do with types or personality, and it was used by an occult teacher to kind of deconstruct the false self and find your pure essence. That was Oscar Ichazo, who got hold of it in the 1960s, and from Gurdjieff's followers, and Gurdjieff is the one who came up with it in 1916. Then after Ichazo had a student named Claudio Naranjo. Now, Claudio Naranjo is kind of key here because he is the one who came up with the types. And he took it from Ichazo, but he taught it differently. And the types, he admits in a video that he got through automatic writing, which is a form of spirit contact.
Yep, and I'm gonna pause you there because we actually have proof. So I'm gonna show the video for everyone to see. So just as you said, we're about to show it right now.
Okay.
So at the conference, I told them I had made up this tale that all this came from millennia ago, and that this information came from the Sufis.
Yes.
I told him that actually Oscar Ichazo had not described any of the Enneatypes either. Actually, in the 7 months we spent with him, he devoted about 6 hours to talk about the Enneagram, but he never came to describe any one of the types.
That was
all that came from Enrique Chile,
yeah.
So that came from my own observations, but mostly from autocratic writing.
Automatic writing?
Yeah, it came to me through automatic writing.
What did?
The specific information
And it's any types.
about any types, which I then verified through observation, because I was surrounded by people I was teaching and exploring with.
And I had friends in Eureka who told me essentially the same story.
Yeah.
That there was no mention of no others besides. You
Yes.
said there was no mention of any of the types except from you.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yep, he got it in automatic writing, a form of spirit contact. He talks about his spirits as higher authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And he says in that same video that Ichazo also had higher authorities, and he respected that. He sees this as a good thing. And this is a typical view that you would find in the occult and the New Age. And that actually is a New Age channel there. That program is a New Age program. All those people are New Agers. And so Claudio Naranjo has this Enneagram chart with the types he gets through automatic writing, and he takes it to Esalen in California, and he's teaching it. Esalen was a very edgy place. It was a mixture of spiritual teachers, people trying out innovative psychological theories like Gestalt therapy and scream therapy. And it actually was a breeding ground for the human potential movement, and in part for the New Age. And so a lot of different people were gathering there of all stripes. And Naranjo taught a Jesuit priest there named Bob Oakes the Enneagram. And Bob Oakes took it back to a seminary in Loyola, and that's where Richard Rohr learned it. So now Richard Rohr, he was not a Jesuit, but he learned it there, and then ended up writing a book with Andreas Ebert, a Lutheran pastor. Actually, the first book was in German, and then it was translated into English and published a couple of times, and it came out as the Enneagram, a Christian Perspective. People might like to know that in the first edition, they write in the preface or the intro that it has no Christian origins. And then that was changed in the later edition to imply or to say, Evagrius Ponticus and this 4th century monk might have started it. And it began to take on, these myths about its origins that have been repeated, unfortunately, in most, if not all, of the Enneagram books that have come out. So Richard Rohr's book is there, 1991. Not a whole lot of huge influence there. It's in parts of the Catholic Church, although the Catholic Church never endorsed it. And then Richard Rohr makes friends with the progressives, and they adopt the Enneagram. And then Richard Rohr's disciples, Suzanne Stabile and Chris Horitz, write books published by VP and Zondervan. It gets into the church. Now, Richard Rohr, because of that influence, I have heard Enneagram teachers in churches on video recommend Richard Rohr.
Wow.
This is very, very disturbing. One of them even called him a Christian teacher and a wise man. And I'm just sitting there I don't know whether I'm just frozen in shock or I want to scream. I kind of want to do both. And I'm thinking he's telling these people this. People sitting there who probably don't know who Richard Rohr is are going to go and get online on Amazon and look up his books. And Richard Rohr's theology is deadly because it is almost completely heretical.
I've seen some very prominent names from the New Apostolic Reformation movement, really promote Rohr, tweet about Rohr, all types of quotes and things like that. And just some notable singers too, some Christian contemporary singers, that came out of the Bethel movement. So Gloria
Gaither endorsed him back in 2016 or 2017.
Wow.
I did a Facebook post. She had her Bible study group read a book by Richard Rohr, and I think she interviewed him. Very favorite. She's just wild about him.
Wow.
And I did a Facebook post on. A lot of people were very shocked and upset by it, but I said, this is a real thing. We can't think that somehow people in the church or Christians are immune to false teachers, because
sure.
if you look at the New Testament, so much of it is warnings to believers about false teachings that had gotten into the church. I mean,
Yep.
Galatians and Corinthians, Colossians talks about some of it. So we know, and First John, so we know that Christians can be deceived. And, this was a very good example. And I thought, this will make people realize you have to be alert. You can, like the Bible says, you have to be vigilant.
For sure.
And sober-minded. You can't just relax and think everything's okay. I know the Bible, so I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I don't think we should be scared, but we just need to be vigilant.
Yeah. Amen.
And test things. And so here was an example with Gloria Gaither. And then, of course, yes, a lot of other people have endorsed Rohr. And these people I heard were in like conservative churches, and they're seen as conservatives. I know that he was a speaker at the Young Clergy Conference in 2017 for the Nazarene denomination, which most people would think of as a conservative denomination.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this just opened the door more for Richard Rohr.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just, I don't understand how anyone, any Christian with a heart for proper exegesis and hermeneutics could really listen to more than 30 seconds of, or read more than 30 seconds of Rohr, listen to more than 30 seconds of an interview. I literally, Marcia, I told you this when we were, before we went live, I was reading the book, the Enneagram book that he had. And I love listening to Theology and Apologetics podcast during working out, during cardio and lifting weights. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to properly, gather the information I can, to research to properly represent him as I'm criticizing him. Because I've looked at plenty of Rohr interviews, but as far as his literature is concerned, I've just been snippets of his stuff. And so I started diving into that book, and I literally had to stop taking notes, because I always take notes. I listen, I take notes. I do that with YouTube videos too of people I don't agree with, that's really theologically not right, or just from an apologist standpoint, a lot of people who speak against Christianity, and I really focus on different parts and quotes and things like that, and just take quotes because it's from them, so I'm not straw manning, right?
Right.
And so to prevent straw manning, I took notes, and I was at the gym, and I literally had to stop taking notes because I was spending so much time stopping my workouts, putting notes on my phone, like pausing, taking notes, going back to lifting weights. Oh my gosh. And I stopped and started taking more notes. And I was like, I'm done. I'm just done taking notes. And then I tried again. I was somewhere else doing, trying to, I think it was right before I was about to, because I lead men's Bible study on Wednesday nights. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to, because I was studying right before the Bible study. And I was like, okay, I'll carve this time out to listen to more of Rohr, right? And so I did it again, start taking notes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go. I got to stop, because it was just taking so much of my time, listening to probably 10, 15 seconds of the content and writing notes. It was just taking too much of my time.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was to read that. So, yeah.
I know. It's bad.
It really is. So you brought up some really good points. Again, some things that really sparked me and really kind of connected me to you, is that you were bringing up some really, really interesting points as far as the Barnum effect, the four effect. Bertram Four is really big on the fallacy of personal validation and things like that. So bring up a few of those things as far as the Enneagram. And you can tackle it from a New Age standpoint. I'll tackle it from a psychology standpoint as far as just why the Enneagram just at large. It's just not, even if it didn't have occult backgrounds, it's just not a good tool. It's just not a reputable tool.
No, it's really not. It has no validity in psychology. It didn't come from psychological theories or studies or research. It's not based on any valid personality theories. And so the types are really basically kind of meaningless. We quote a psychologist in our book, a Christian psychologist, who said, the categories are just they're not real categories, and they overlap a lot, and they're not distinct enough, and they just don't work as personality categories. And so there's lots of things wrong with it. And what I like to point out when I was trying to expose this is that as a former astrologer, I had so many people, all my clients thought, when I was doing the reading of their birth chart, how accurate it was. Because I had people defending the Enneagram to me by saying, but it works, or it really described me, or it really helped me understand my husband. And so I said, do you know how many millions of people say that astrology works for them? And how many millions say they fit even just their zodiac sign, much less their birth chart? And I said, this is you. If you just go by testimonials, you would have to say astrology was valid, because so many people say that is so true of me. Yep. And I heard this and I saw it, I witnessed it. And of course, being an astrologer, I believed in astrology. I really believed it was a blueprint for your life. I believed in the meaning of the planets and the zodiac signs and everything. So, I was a really true believer. And so I even had, of course, I knew my chart. So things would happen to me and I would say, oh, yeah, that's because I'm Sagittarius rising. That's why I acted that way. And that's, I feel that way because my moon is in whatever sign.
Yep.
And so you start to filter everything through these things. And so people doing the Enneagram will say, because I'm an 8 wing 7, this is what's going on. Now I understand why I had this fight with my husband. And it becomes more real to you because you're filtering it. And I know the confirmation bias is a big part of this. You know that more than I do. So I was showing parallels between why astrology seems to work and why the Enneagram seems to work. They're very, very close.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So you brought up some really, really good points there. And before I get into a lot of the psychology of it, I was seeing some YouTube stuff as far as there was videos as far as I'm a 9 wing 1. This is the reason why I can't interact really well with the 4 wing 3. I mean, I'm just and that's the same thing as I used to be really, really big into horoscopes about 25 years ago. And I mean, every single day I would wake up and I would get a paper and I would look at the horoscopes and the sports page when I was in high school. And every day. And I was because my birthday's in July and I would be a Cancer, according to my July area. And so I would look at the Cancer astrology every single day. And a lot of times with horoscopes, it would be the same way. It'd be the 9, for instance, with the Enneagram, the 9 wing 1 can't interact well with the 3 wing 4, and it's the same deal. You're a Cancer, you're more calm and collected, because our Sagittarius, and it's the same thing. You can't interact well with the Sagittarius. It's the same concept. It's the same concept.
It is.
And it's sad. Again, from a psychological standpoint, it's sad because it goes back to the 4 effect. It goes back to the fallacy of personal validation. Because essentially, what happens is you go back to the cognitive bias, and you get to the point where you have a lot of this 4 effect of people kind of validating something to them that was very general. And the interesting part about the four effect, and I'll explain this in one of my videos, is that Bertram Four, he actually, there's actually some literature I want to read. It's from his writings, the fallacy of personal validation, a classroom demonstration of gullibility. All right, so this is from Four. A couple things that I saw that was really interesting that he highlighted. He said confirmation of a variety of predictions which will differentiate among the number of clients is necessary if validation is to be accepted with any degree of confidence. The crystal gazer is likely to be aware of some of these points, and other pseudo diagnosticians, though they may be unaware of the fallacies inherent in their procedures, make effective use of universal validity and personal validation in deceiving their clients. And so that's a real big thing when it comes to crystal gazers and tarot card readers. There's a reason why a lot of people have been scam artists in those industries, because they understand the personal validation. So you can have a bunch of statements and people will automatically psychologically say, okay, yes, that's me. Yes, that's me. That's me.
Yeah.
And that spawned the Four experiment, which he actually had a classroom of 39 students that took the diagnostic interest blank test. And so it had 13 statements on there, and I'll read all of them. The statements was, you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage. While you have some personality weaknesses, you're generally able to compensate for them. Your sexual adjustment has presented problems for you. Discipline and self-control outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. Number 7, at times you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. Number 8, you prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. Number 9, you pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept other statements without satisfactory proof. Number 10, you have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourselves to others. 11, at times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you are introverted, wary, reserved. 12, some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic. 13, security is one of your major goals in life. All right. So the interesting thing about the Four effect is that people filled out the DIB, checked with them a week later. 4.3 out of 5 people affirmed those statements, right? And the big ruse of it all is that Four grabbed those statements from a mixed bag of astrology horoscopes from newspapers, and that was the point of that, to do that, and people are like, oh yeah, that's me. A few things from the results. All the students accepted the DIB as a good and perfect instrument. All of the students accepted the DIB as a good or perfect instrument for personality measurement. Most of them could be accused of a logical error in accepting the test on such scanty evidence, is what he said.
Wow.
He goes on by saying, validation of a test instrument or of a personality sketch by means of personal validation is a fallacious procedure which presupposes objectivity of self-evaluation and an understanding of other persons on the part of the client. Another thing he said, using the method of personal validation, a fictitious personality sketch can easily deceive persons into approving a diagnostic device, even when there is incomplete acceptance of the sketch itself. Last point here.
Wow.
When self-esteem is threatened, memory functions operate in such a manner as to avert the threat and enhance self-esteem. Such memory changes are defensive distortions of recall rather than simple forgetting. Like, really interesting information.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it really
is. Because we really do deceive ourselves in order to believe certain things.
Yep.
And that's one of the factors, is that we really don't see ourselves as we truly are. We see ourselves as we like to see ourselves.
Exactly.
as we think we are, as we think we should be. And that's one reason that these things work. It's because it appeals to that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of the fallacy of personal validation. From a word of faith standpoint, they take Proverbs 6 out there, just butchers that, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really big word of faith verse, and that is one of the biggest just ridiculous parts of that is the Proverbs 23:7. As a man think of his heart, so is he. And talk about your personal validation fallacy. That is one of the most ridiculous personal validation fallacy scriptures, just taking it totally out of context. And the funny part of the context of Proverbs 23 is that it's talking about eating from a ruler's table, eating from a master's table, ruler's table, right? And basically, in layman's terms, that would be like, hey, we're going to honor Dr. Chris for so many years in service, right? So we're going to have a bunch of apologists come and a bunch of psychology experts come. So Marcia, you're invited to the gala of Dr. Chris, right? So I'm sitting at the head of the table, and I love Rooster's rings. I don't know if they'll have Roosters in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Northern Virginia, but Roosters is a chicken wing restaurant.
Oh,
yeah,
I've never heard of it. No.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm a big fan of Roosters.
I'm vegetarian.
Okay, gotcha. Say the days that you aren't vegetarian. for the sake of this analogy.
Okay, I'll pretend.
Thank you. So say for instance, you love chicken wings and you're eating chicken wings, and it's just kind of like a smorgasbord of like, hey, let's all just eat and dine. And so there's one more piece of chicken left, and I love wings, you love wings, and we're both just dining. And so you're like, hey, Dr. Chris, can I have that last piece of chicken there? And I'm sitting there like, oh, go ahead. It's a full type of deal. We're all eating, we're all having a fun time. And essentially in my heart, or when you leave, I tell someone, oh, that old greedy dog, I can't believe that she's eating that piece of chicken. She doesn't need that piece of chicken. We all know that she doesn't need that piece of chicken. And so I'm telling people this. And so that's what the context of as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Right, exactly.
Right? That's the context of that verse, of that passage. And so the word of faith movement, a lot of astrology does it too, New Age. They take that, especially from a Christian standpoint, they take that as you can speak or whatever. You can't have negative thoughts. You can't say you're sick. You can't say you can't do all these things because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Yeah.
They use the Proverbs 23:7 verse, and I'm like, come on, man, you can't do stuff terrible. Like
that. I did a Facebook post on that because that's quoted by New Thought writers and leaders.
Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely.
It's an area it's connected to the New Age.
Oh, yeah.
And I did a whole post on it because I was so tired of seeing it misused. And I said, look, at the passage is very short. You can read it in like less than 60 seconds.
Exactly.
And it's so clear. It's like what you said. It's really about hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. It's about the man acting like he cares for you and he wants to be a hospitable host, and he's really resenting it.
Exactly.
He's resenting you.
Exactly.
And that's what it is. And God's saying that's really what he's like. It's how he's feeling inside, not how he's acting, because God sees the inside. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of the passage.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the personal validation fallacy.
Yeah.
Because you make it about me. You make it about, oh yeah, that's me as a man thinking his heart. So you talked about New Thought. James Allen has a whole book on it, right? As a man thinketh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like it talks about that whole Proverbs 23, just taking it so far out of context that
Wow.
he wrote a whole book on it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's
Oh
interesting.
yeah. I
Wow.
read the book when I
Wow.
was really big in the Word of Faith. I read the book, and then I read it again, probably a few months ago to just kind of. I've been on a Word of Faith movement for 15 years now. I left in late 2006, and it's I read it about 15, 16 years ago. I read it again earlier this year, for from an apologetic lens. I read that book, Marcia, and I said, "Oh my gosh, like what was I thinking?" And it's so easy. Again, it's so easy for that four effect to be implemented and manipulated in people because again,
Yes.
that fallacy of personal validation really gets, and it's easy. Like I was just talking about, it's so easy to deceive yourself and wanting to shield off those negative things and
Yeah.
validate yourself personally. And
Yeah.
the Enneagram is like par for the course when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. It's very seductive. The
Yeah.
Enneagram is just, it takes that, all those factors are in there. Plus, we have a natural self-interest.
Mhm.
We're naturally fascinated by ourselves.
Yep.
And we read this stuff and just like, oh, that's me. That
Mhm.
really gets me. Someone understands me. This really works. And you just eat it up. It's just really like candy.
Yeah.
And people don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
So when people find out that what it really is, that it's not valid, some people are convicted and they will stop. I mean, many have told me that. They've said, I just had to throw it all away because I realized this was not from God and it's not true, etc. Other people will go on and come up with complicated rationalizations to justify it.
Yep. There's a
So
confirmation bias
I
there.
see that. I see
Yeah.
that happening.
Yep, for
So,
sure.
and that's really, and that kind of person, it doesn't matter what facts and reasons you present, they just resist it even more.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly enough, that's a psychological term called the anchoring effect. So with the
Oh,
anchoring effect,
okay.
yeah. So what happens with the anchoring effect is like someone is more privy to accept and promote and support the first set of information that they receive.
Okay.
And all the information that's received after that, it's not necessarily new information. They try to make it correlate to the first set of information that they
Oh,
got.
okay.
A lot of people in marketing use that. A lot of real estate investors use that anchoring effect. Say, for instance, a good example of the anchoring effect is, say, for instance, I owned a store and I was just, I used to be a retail manager about 20 years ago, and I used to actually do purchasing and ordering. So I would buy stuff wholesale. I would work at a sports store, and so we would buy the T-shirts for $5-10 and sell them for 30, you know what I mean? And to get a profit from it. And so what happens is a lot of times when you're in those stores, like especially the high end stores, they're wholesale, they're paying $7-10 for it. They're selling it for 50, right?
Mhm.
And so what happens is that's a $40 profit. And so what happens is they'll say $49.99 and they'll just wait for a few people to buy that. And then they'll say on sale today, clearance $29.99, right? So now your mind is thinking, oh, I'm getting a deal,
Yes. Yeah.
where in essence you're not. They're still profiting $20-30 from it, $25-30 from it, right? And so that's what the anchoring effect is. And a lot of times when it comes from the standpoint of apologetics, people are more privy to hear, and that's why it's hard to unlearn something. When I was in the Word of Faith movement, it was really hard to unlearn many Word of Faith things, as far as like touch not thine anointed, taking another scripture out of context. As a man thinketh, 20 Proverbs 23:7. It was hard to unlearn that. It was hard to learn. It was hard to unlearn things biblical when it comes to tongues and tithing and things like that. It was really hard to unlearn a lot of biblical concepts in its proper context, because you
Right.
keep hearing so many things that's kind of infused by the pastor at the time to say, hey, don't say you're sick. You don't have enough faith.
Right.
If you're sick, you don't have enough
Right.
faith, right?
Right.
The tithe or die principle. The Bible it was clear as far as Paul in 2 Corinthians 8:9. We're supposed to give. We're supposed to be cheerful givers. But there's a lot of word of faithers that has that, that tithe or die, taking Malachi 3 out of context, things like that. And so it's really hard to unlearn that type of things, because if you feel like you're giving generously, but it's 8% or 12%, you know what I mean? Like you kind of feel so like defeated in your head, you know what I mean? And that's what's hard to unlearn. And a lot of these people, instead of going through that rough unlearning process, especially when it comes to getting away from erroneous Christian doctrine, they're more prone to the new information. They're more prone to correlate it to the anchor. They're more prone to correlate it to what they've been hearing.
Right.
Even if it doesn't, even if it makes absolutely no sense, they'll try to find their way to defend the first set of information that they've received. Yeah. Very, very interesting concept. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that with the New Age and Enneagram.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So how would you how would you get to, before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about Richard Rohr. For those who don't know who Richard Rohr is, I know we've talked a lot about him already, but I think it's really, really important to understand his impact that he's had in the Christian sphere. So who is Richard Rohr, for those listening who don't really know who he is?
Okay. He's a Franciscan friar. A friar is different from a monk. I learned that a friar engages with others and in society, whereas a monk tends to be more in a secluded lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So he is part of the Roman Catholic Church, but he is in the Franciscan order. And I've also learned that the orders, although they aren't independent of the Roman Catholic Church, they do function somewhat independently. The church tends to kind of leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has a lot of independence in that sense, because the Franciscans aren't going after him. And and so Richard Rohr, what he teaches is not even Roman Catholic doctrine. He teaches that, first of all, the first incarnation of Christ was creation.
Okay.
It was the first incarnation. So we were all in Christ because we are all in and part of creation.
Mm-hmm.
We're automatically part of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Christ permeates creation, the leaves, the mosquitoes, the rocks, the rivers. Richard Rohr says, that's all. Christ is in all. He calls it a Christ-soaked world.
Yeah.
And Jesus was the second incarnation of Christ. Now, Jesus, he will say Jesus was the Christ, because while Jesus was on earth before the crucifixion, he was the Christ. But at the crucifixion, or rather at the resurrection, Jesus was back to Jesus, and Christ was the universal Christ. And the universal Christ just kind of is out there, part of the world, pulling everything towards a point of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, everybody, and everything, every animal, everything. So this is an echo of an idea from a man named Teilhard de Chardin, who was a paleontologist who tried to reconcile evolution with the Roman Catholic teachings. And he taught a cosmic Christ pulling creation towards what he called an omega point.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Rohr has referenced Teilhard de Chardin. It's very clear he was strongly influenced by him.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the Catholic Church was not happy with Teilhard de Chardin. And his writings, I think, were pretty much maybe not banned, but basically denounced. And I think they still are, as far as I know. Now, Richard Rohr also teaches that salvation from personal sin is not necessary, because God is not really concerned about our little tiny personal sins. God cares about corporate sin. So this is part of his social justice view.
Yeah.
So, what the corporations are doing, they're polluting the earth. Okay, that's corporate sin. Or rich countries are oppressing the poor. That's corporate sin. This is what God cares about. And this is what we are supposed to be concerned about, not about looking for forgiveness for personal sin.
Yep.
So personal salvation is not needed. And we're all being pulled towards this perfect point anyway. Jesus and the universal Christ are distinct. This is, of course, a major heresy in itself.
Oh, for
I
sure.
mean, you can't get more heretical than that.
Yeah.
And actually, in the New Age, there is a distinction between Jesus and what may be called Christ consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
or Christ, or a universal Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to make it clear, just so people aren't confused. Richard Rohr is not a New Ager. Okay.
Right.
But a lot of his ideas sound New Age, and some of his ideas are compatible with the New Age.
Mm-hmm.
But he is not a New Ager because he believes in what he calls an embodied spirituality. He's anti-Gnostic in the sense that he does not make a distinction between matter and spirit,
Mm-hmm.
the way that it's done in the New Age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw a video where he talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he's embodied spirituality. So everything embodies this divine energy. He even talks about the statues of Hindu gods as being sacred and embodying a sacred energy.
Yeah.
So this is his view, panentheism. And one more point I want to discuss briefly because it's important.
Yeah.
Because I see this getting in the church in a very insidious and subtle way, and that is the perennial wisdom. Perennial wisdom is the view that all religions, no matter how different they appear, share the same core truth and the same core, what they call divine reality, which is really another word for God. So in essence, they're all worshiping and talking and teaching about the same God, although this God is impersonal in the perennial wisdom view. Richard Rohr is very open about his adherence to this view. He talks about it. You can find it on his blog. And this view I am seeing permeating the church through some of Rohr's influential contemplative teachings,
Mm-hmm.
and the Enneagram. A lot of the Enneagram teachers are contemplatives who admire Rohr. And I've read some of the things they've written on their websites or in their books, and to me, it's clear that they are following the perennial view, although they don't use that word. You can kind of tell because they use certain phrases like, "I follow the Christian tradition," or "I follow Christian wisdom," or "I follow wisdom traditions."
Mm-hmm.
These are words that are used a lot by followers of perennial wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just that, but other things they say where Christ is clearly not the linchpin of their beliefs. So I could go on, but I don't want to overwhelm people with information, but it's really important to know he is, as you said, a panentheist.
Mm-hmm.
So God or Christ are contained in the universe, and he's a perennialist.
Yeah.
And you cannot be a perennialist and be a Christian. They are incompatible.
Mm. How would you, if someone pushed back and said they're not, how would you explain that they're incompatible?
Okay, I would say that the reason is if you are a follower of perennial wisdom or the perennial philosophy, then you believe that your path towards truth is a path you forge yourself. It's an inner journey, and you forge it yourself. And on this spiritual journey, you will come to realize the perennial truths. And that will awaken you.
Yeah.
So they say you're already there. You just need to be awakened.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about salvation. They don't talk about forgiveness of sins. They don't talk about the necessity of Jesus dying for sins. And they don't believe Jesus had to die for sins. So You take that out of Christianity, you don't have Christianity.
So how would they? So how would they explain Acts 9 with Paul's road to Damascus? It wasn't a awakening based on anything he did. It was a shot from the Holy Spirit. You know, it didn't have anything to do with Paul.
When he fell to the ground, yeah.
Yeah, it was blinded. Yeah,
yeah, it was a pretty strong shot there.
Yeah.
I don't know how they'd explain it, but probably they would have some answer like, well, that is a surface story for Christians to get into. You have to enter through kind of the kindergarten door first.
Okay.
And so when you're whether it's Christianity or Hinduism or Judaism, you're entering the kindergarten door where you are learning the basics of that religion, and you're getting benefit from it because it has this core truth behind it. And so even though you may think, Paul had his eyes open, he had not believed in Christ, and now he did, and now he's a different, he's a new man. And you could say, well, see, that's a part of the awakening, but you have to keep on the journey. And they might even say that's symbolic of the real awakening that you're going to have later. Now, see, I'm guessing all this just from having been a New Ager.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking, how would I explain that as a New Ager? And that's how I would explain it. But I do know they believe everyone should follow their own religion. They don't believe in uniting the religions or melding them together. Okay. They believe each religious path has its own benefits for those who follow it.
I was listening to the book, and he was talking about Revelation 21:6 as far as, I'm the Alpha and Omega. And just using that in a sense of the importance of kind of following your own path, as far as just the syncretism of religion, like as far as the importance of having many religions, how that just further kind of explains, how, Christ is the Alpha and Omega. I'm like, oh my goodness, like what is this? Like what is this? And there's the Center for Action of Contemplation is his his company, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Say that again.
He founded it in 1986.
Yep. So this is about, he talks about the incarnation, and he says, I'll just read an excerpt. He said, many do believe, matter of fact, let's read it all together, class. Let's read this all together. This is how bad this is. All right, so here we go. It says, let's start here. Many do believe in the bodily resurrection, as I do too, but in a way that acts little except a mere intellectual assertion of a religious doctrine. We can go much further than that. I choose to believe in some kind of bodily resurrection because it localizes the whole mystery in this material and earthly world as in our own bodies, the only world we know and the world that God created and loves, and in which God chose to incarnate. We all want to know that this wonderful thing called life is going somewhere and somewhere good. It is going to someplace good because it came from someplace good, a place of original blessing instead of original sin. Mm-hmm. I know where I come from and where I'm going. Jesus says, but you do not. So pause. so again, it's like, this is just again, hermeneutics 101. You cannot shape an entire worldview and try to find Bible passages to infuse a worldview that you've already created. That is one of the worst things to do when it comes to proper exegesis and hermeneutics. Yes. People do it all the time. Yeah. Instead of going to the Bible and studying the Bible, studying and understanding proper exegesis, hermeneutics when it comes to the location, the narration, who was he speaking to, things like that. You can't just take four words from a passage and infuse it into an entire worldview that does not represent. I think it was Greg Kokel that talks about in his book Tactics. You cannot just read one Bible verse, right? And that's really, really, really important to understand that you can't just read one Bible verse and infuse it in a worldview that doesn't have anything to do with representing this. And that's the danger that I saw. And again, that's one of the reasons why, we'll go back to this in a minute. That's one of the reasons why I just had to keep stopping. When I was working out and taking notes, like I was just writing Bible verses down. He quoted 1 John 4:1. He quoted 1 Thessalonians 5:21.
Yeah, he quotes the Bible. He quotes the Bible.
Yeah, and I was just like, he kept quoting, and I just had to stop every single time. Like, no.
He's wrong. Every time he references a Bible verse, he's wrong. What he says about it is wrong.
Yeah. Case in point, let's finish up here real quick. So he came to tell us the Alpha and Omega of history have to match, or our lives have no natural arc, trajectory, or organic meaning. The end has to be in the beginning. As T.S. Eliot said in the book of Revelation 1:8, 21:6, 22:13, it states that Jesus is the Alpha of history, which Duns Scotus called the first idea in the mind of God. And I've noticed that he does that a lot. When I was reading the book, he'll talk about a Bible verse, and then he'll talk about, like, he'll bring up like philosophers and things like that.
Yeah, he quotes Duns Scotus a lot.
Yeah, Duns Scotus called the first idea in the mind of God. Let me go back to that. It states that Jesus is the Alpha of history, which Duns Scotus calls the first idea in the mind of God, and also called the Omega point of history.
Yeah,
which was the phrase used by Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah, there's Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah. So and it's like, why in the world would you just? What does this have to do with proper Christian biblical doctrine here?
Yeah, it doesn't have any. He has his theology and his philosophy, and he goes to the Bible and distorts and takes things out of context.
Yes.
I have seen him like paraphrase things and say, well, that's what John says in, John 12 or something. He said blah, blah. And then you go look up the verse. It's not anything like it's not what he said.
Yeah.
It just really is amazing.
Yeah, it is. Well, in closing, Marcia, just kind of let us know, just give a just real quick. This is another thing. Just as far as just a real quick from a psychological point of view when it comes to this, as far as the Enneagram is concerned, I would even throw in the Myers-Briggs in here too. The Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs are pseudoscience, but they're widely viewed as personality types, which especially the Enneagram, that even wasn't its origin. I think you've explained that very well here. But when it comes to Myers-Briggs, it's the same way, as far as not verifiable from psychology experts and things like that.
Right.
And they're under the camp of personality types. And one big thing in psychology is, don't focus on types, focus more on traits. All right. So essentially, like for instance, the big 5 personality traits, the Ocean method, the openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Right. So the Ocean method is basically, those are 5 big personality types, and they all, it's an acronym for Ocean. If 5 people were stranded in an ocean, and for 3 months, the one who's open to say, okay, I'm gonna pitch a tent, I'm gonna see how this goes. The one who's extrovert is gonna, start talking and be a life of the party. Hey, we're gonna have a good 3 months. The one who's agreeable is going to be one who's, serving whatever, coconuts to everybody. The one who is neurotic is going to be, the one who's conscientious is going to be the huge planner, like super aware, hyper aware, planning for the future, making sure everything's together. And the one who's neurotic is going to be just crying, just bawling their eyes out, right? Like that's the neuroticism is dealing with a lot of depression, anxiety. It's a close connection to that. So the one who's neurotic will be like, oh my gosh, I got this, I got kids at home. Somebody help me. Can we blow some smoke signals up, please? You know what I mean? So something. And so that's viewed as more of a continuum. And that's the reason why some people like the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram are considered unverifiable and non-reliable from psychology experts, is because it talks about more of a state. All right. Like same thing. Like for instance, I've taken Myers-Briggs, I've done Enneagram, I've done the Big Five. And for instance, when I took the Enneagram, I was a 8. I was a type 8. I forgot what's the 8.
I don't even remember. I don't think offhand what it is. It's like gone. I think 9 is peacemaker. I don't remember.
I think the Challenger, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
The Challenger.
might be.
Yeah. So I mean, and here's the thing. Like when I took the 8, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. I love asking questions. I love doing that stuff. But the thing is, here's the problem though, Marcia, and you know this, and this is to a lot of people who's listening. For instance, say if someone takes the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, they, similar to what I was explaining with the pastor, who was like, okay, let's do a whole sermon on 4s and say you're a 4 from the beginning, and they're going to be 4. They were made of 4. God made them a 4. And it's like, no, because even if you take some of those personality assessments like Enneagram or like in Myers-Briggs, for instance, if you take it between 18 and 33 is the biggest time for someone to experience stress. And so if I took the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs at 25, because of the personal validation fallacy, that's me for the rest of my life. And so I accept that without allowing, God to continue to mold me and shape me and to take and to cast my cares to him and say, okay, well, I'm just neurotic, or that's just this is a part of who I am. That's my state. Because I'm a Sagittarius, or because I'm an Aquarius, or because I'm a type 8, or because I'm an INTP, it's like you hone those things. And it's like, maybe it's a season in your life that you lost your job and you took the Myers-Briggs on the Enneagram. And the problem with that is that it becomes deceptive because it causes someone to say, this is my state. Yeah. Right. And when it comes to personality traits, there's a continuum. And like, for instance, someone could be that's the reason why a lot of psychology experts are more inclined to accept the Big Five, is because someone can be experiencing a heavy dose of neuroticism at 25 when they lost their job, and now they're well off at 45. And if they would have believed what they believed at 25, they would have still been saying, this is who I am 20 years later without taking it again. And realizing that you're a whole different result. And I've done that before. I've taken Myers-Briggs multiple times. And I think ENTP was one of the other ones. And then I went to INTP. I went to I heard
that it changes if you take it again. Come up with different things. And I've looked at the types. I didn't try to fit into any of the Enneagram types, but I've looked at the descriptions, and I actually could be about 4 of them.
Likewise.
I had actually a few people told me.
Likewise.
I tried to do it, and I fit like 5 of them, or I fit 3 of them, and I couldn't decide which of the 3.
So you're an 8 with a wing 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And I said, well, it's good you gave up, because you're not
right.
Those, Exactly. It's crazy. It's like trying to decide if you're a Gemini or a Leo or an Aquarius. And, you're going to find little bits probably in a lot of it, in a lot of the zodiac signs and a lot of the Enneagram types. And like you said, you change. And also one of the points I want to make, 2 points I want to make real quickly. One is ironically, the Enneagram is really not about it's about your personality, but it's about your personality as the false self.
Right.
And
right.
it's hiding the true self, which Richard Ward talks about. The true self has never been separated from God. That's the true self. And that's what he wants you to find in the Enneagram.
Wow.
But so that's one thing. That's an irony of it. And the other thing is that God cares about our character.
Amen.
God cares about our character and our integrity. And we are being shaped into the image of Christ. We're being
100%.
conformed to the image of Christ. And getting into all this personality stuff, especially with these false tools, is just a humongous distraction.
Yes.
And it
I agree.
undermines our, our path as a Christian.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
100%. Amen to that. Well, that's a good note to end with.
yes.
Once again, let the listeners know about your. Is it short for Cana, or is it's just a
Yeah,
Christian?
CANA is the acronym for Christian Answers for the New Age.
Okay.
And so I have a website, and I also have a Facebook ministry page,
Okay.
Christian Answers for the New Age. For those on Facebook, if they want to like that or follow it, they can keep up with my posts there.
Perfect. Marcia, it's been a pleasure.
For me too.
Yeah, awesome. It's been a fantastic time. Thank you so much once again. Follow her. She's doing some great things as far as just really debunking these tools. And again, I was so excited because even from a psychology standpoint, again, I'm a Christian and I'm a psychology doctor. And I look at these things like, when you're talking about the Enneagram, I'm glad you even bring it. Just again, I'm glad you brought the history in it. I think those things are important. But even from a psychology standpoint,
Yeah,
it's pseudoscience. It's not verifiable. Don't use it because from a trust me, from the standpoint of a psychology doctor, please do not wrap your head around the Enneagram. All right. And do not do sermons about them. Do not think that someone's a 4 for all of their life. Do not think someone's born a 7 and going to be a 7 for the rest of their life. It's about a continuum of personality traits that things happen, things ebb and flow, but regardless of whatever part of the ocean method you experience, allow God to continue to mold and shape you.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we're not conformed to the world, but we're transformed with the renewing of our minds. We fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, right? And so at the end of the day, it's really, really important to trust in the Lord. And Christians, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. And at the end of the day, we cannot shape ourselves around Enneagrams, Myers-Briggs, all those things. And I would even say from the Big Five personality traits, those are helpful, but at the same time, you have to just continue to be in Christ. My favorite scripture is John 3:30. He must become greater, I must become less. And that is really just my statement of faith. And that's how I live. He must become greater, I must become less. I don't care 2 licks about my wretched self. Oh, wretched man that I am. Paul says in Philippians, all that I've acquired is dung, compared, to Christ. So we really need as Christians to really focus on Christ, and all of these tools and things like that. They can be a really big distraction to us really focusing on Scripture. Focus on the Word. Put the Enneagram aside and go to the Word. Go to the Word of God. Don't go to the Enneagram. Don't bring the Enneagram next to you and say, "Oh, okay, this matches up really well." No, don't do that. don't do that.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure, Marcia. Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you.
There's been many people on the side saying that they've received a lot of great information. Keep doing what you're doing. God bless you, and keep working for Jesus. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.